My name is Charlotte. Since my son was born, Christmas has become less about the holy night and more about preparing a huge chicken dinner, using my child's belief in Santa as a shield and getting pestered for the latest trend video games. I'm 40 now. These new video games are pretty expensive, and before you know it, a new console is out and you find yourself having to buy the whole thing again. But Santa never says hold up because a new one will come out, so we parents sadly prepare the gifts for our son. Even though my son says there is no such thing as Santa, he conveniently claims this year I'll get Super Mario from Santa. Prophet-minded son, wonder who he takes after, me? Today's story is about the time before I was blessed with a son who's just like me. I really want you to hear it. As a child, I was, well, it's hardly worth mentioning, just as the title suggests. I lived in the shadow of my brother Nathan, who was a year older, excelling at everything and considered a genius. Well, even if he was a genius, up until the lower grades of elementary school, it was nothing extraordinary. Things like being able to read signs unusually well for his age, mastering riding a bike in less time than other kids in the neighborhood, or being fast at running. But for our parents, it was enough to proudly say, "Our son can do anything and everything, isn't he amazing?" On the other hand, I was average in every aspect. The epitome of ordinary, an ordinary child. I had to practice more than most to learn to ride a bike, and my report cards were a neat rows of C's, not outstanding but not a failure either. In other words, I was a child with no particular distinguishing features. You could call me a professional at being average. At first, my parents thought it was normal for the younger sister to develop slower, but gradually they started treating my brother and me differently. They would attend his parent-teacher days, but not mine. At the sports festival, they would video him just standing in line and wouldn't even take a photo of me. I was both frustrated and lonely, so I worked hard and managed to score 100 on a test. But instead of praise, I was met with a cold response from my mom. "Nathan always gets 100. Aren't you embarrassed to brag about getting 100 just once or twice? You're always so bland and clumsy." That was the moment I realized I would never be in my parents' eyes unless I surpassed my brother. Eventually, my brother joined the local soccer team and became a prominent figure with his exceptional athletic ability. My mother would beam saying, "Nathan is amazing," as other moms praised him. If he scored a goal, dinner that night would be lavish, and if his team won a championship, he would be rewarded with new clothes or shoes. But I was the one who had to eat the leftovers my brother didn't want, and I was given his old rewards when they were no longer new. The difference between us was like that between a king and a commoner, maybe even less. In those days, I wasn't shedding tears, not at all. Maybe because it had been that way for so long, I gradually became emotionally detached from my family. Crying over every little thing would have been too much for my heart. I had to close off my emotions to protect myself. When I was in the upper grades of elementary school, my life began to change. My father, who had been working at a franchise restaurant, decided to start his own business. My mother helped with his work, and for some reason, I ended up being responsible for the household chores. Why did I have to do the housework and not my middle school brother? It was useless to ask. "The reason is Nathan is busy with his club activities," was the only answer I got. Even when I reached middle school, I was still stuck doing the chores. Entering adolescence, I started to rebel a bit, saying, "Let me have some freedom." But my mother scolded me, "Charlotte, you shouldn't be playing around," and even forbade me from joining any clubs. As a result, I never got to walk home with friends after school. Right after leaving school gate, I was always in a rush to go grocery shopping. The school and the supermarket were far apart and in opposite directions. Yet my parents would mock me, saying, "Nathan is amazing at both clubs and studying. Compared to him, Charlotte really has no redeeming qualities." Even my brother, who always asked for seconds of the meals I cooked, would say things like, "Having her as a sister is embarrassing." I wasn't allowed to join any clubs, and my study time was taken up by chores, so how could I achieve anything other than household tasks? Although I said I was emotionally detached from my parents, I couldn't let go of the hope that someday they would recognize me, so I kept trying. I did my best with the household tasks and improved a lot in cooking by imitating recipes from books I read in the library. But not once was I praised or even thanked. Around this time, I began to feel that my efforts were reaching their limits. Moreover, as my father's business started to take off, my parents began telling everyone Nathan will be the successor. Looking back, it's surprising they were so confident about stable management until my brother's generation just a few years after opening. But they cherished my brother more than ever as a supposed heir. Indeed, he was always at the top of his class and easily got into prestigious high school. My Nathan has such flair in everything he does, but Charlotte, even as Nathan's leftovers, she's terrible. I wonder why I even gave birth to her. It was just a painful waste. I'll never forget the words my mother said, laughing and drinking on the day my brother entered high school. I don't like these parents at all, and I don't want their love, but why does it hurt so much? I don't want to be loved. I convinced myself of that to protect my heart. But I finally realized all I ever wanted was a little recognition, just you did well, and a glance my way. As I listened to my parents joyously celebrating my brother's enrollment, I cried about them for the first time. Months passed, my parents told me, Charlotte, you can just drop out and take care of the house, that's all we need from you. Even my brother agreed, saying with your grades it's economically better if you don't go. Clearly, there is no one on my side in this house. I left the room without saying a word. I thought it was pointless to resist. My parents took my silence as consent and were thrilled, thinking they would get a free housemaid. I am just the leftover of my brother, a painful waste at birth. I had no choice but to give up. Later, during a meeting with my teacher, I told him about my decision to drop out. Of course, my parents didn't come, claiming they were busy with work. The teacher, who seemed to have a hunch about my situation, kept asking, "Are you sure about this?" But I just repeated what my parents had told me. We have discussed it as a family. I really wanted to continue my studies like everyone else, but there's no way those parents would change their minds easily. Relying on the teacher wouldn't make a difference. I couldn't think of any other option but to give up. A few days later, Charlotte, why are you dropping out? My friend Madison, who's also my cousin and the only close friend I have at school, asked me in panic. It seems our homeroom teacher who knew about our relationship had asked her to talk to me. I have to because my parents said so, but it's fine. I don't like studying anyway. It's actually a lucky break. Madison looked at me with a complex expression, probably realizing I was forcing myself to act cheerful. It happened that night. Suddenly, the doorbell rang, and when I opened the door, there stood Madison and her uncle and aunt. "What's up with you guys?" my parents slurred, tipsy and speaking dismissively to Madison's uncle and aunt.
Sister, brother-in-law, is it true you're making Charlotte drop out?
I was taken aback by Uncle's question. Madison had told him. So what? You know, right? Our son is capable, but our daughter, she is really good for nothing. My mom replied. Uncle looked at her as if she were something foul. Aunt, too. Madison just looked down quietly. Even though they're relatives who know the situation, it's hard to be seen as lesser by your own parents. I was filled with a mix of shame and pain. To be honest, a plain daughter with no future is practically unnecessary. The eldest son is more important. Why don't you take her? My mother joked. Then Uncle replied seriously,
We'll take you up on that offer,
and walked straight towards me.
Charlotte, if you're okay with it, would you come and live with us, become our daughter?
Aunt chimed in. I even changed your diapers when you were little. We have always seen you as our own child, and it's hard for us to see you suffering like this. But I couldn't answer. Really? Become their daughter? Could I finally be happy this time? Would I be compared to Madison and feel unwanted again? Sensing my thoughts, Madison said, from now on, we'll be cousins, sisters, friends, and not just that, but rivals too. I believe those words could only be spoken by Madison, who had seen my upbringing more closely than anyone else. I don't want to be compared to my brother unilaterally. I want to fight on equal terms, at least be seen as a rival, not inferior. She remembered the words I had once whispered. Tears welled up in my eyes from Madison's boundless kindness and her uncle and aunt's warmth. Yes, I want to live with Uncle's family. I want to be sisters with Madison. As I said this, Aunt hugged me, saying, I'm sorry it took so long to decide. And Uncle grasped my hand, apologizing for being late to come for me. Madison beamed. We are going to the same high school, and we'll definitely make the dream of eating ice cream together on the way home come true, with a thumbs up. My parents and brother were stunned, never imagining that their casual remarks would lead to me actually being adopted. But I finally got the family I had always wanted on my own terms. It felt like a sudden clearing of my vision, a dreamlike surreal feeling. Later, my parents, belatedly regretting letting me go, more precisely losing their free housemaid, apparently contacted uncle several times asking, "Won't you bring our daughter back home?" Thanks to uncle firmly rejecting their absurd request, my parents eventually gave up. Just giving up like that after a bit of resistance, it shows how little they really cared. I was truly grateful I had left that house. And then, having officially become the daughter of uncle and his wife, I was freed from household chores and spent my after school hours snacking at convenience stores with Madison and hanging out with her friends. I'll admit, my studies took a slight hit for a while, but I had always balanced studying with chores. So even without them, I kept my grades above average. Madison and I, both academically strong, would playfully compete over test scores. Since we had different strengths and weaknesses, we ended up helping each other and scoring similarly. Unlike my birth parents who rewarded my brother for his grades, my new parents didn't do that. Instead, they always took us out for meals and funs and were generous with clothes. Apparently, uncle made a fortune in stocks, and though it wasn't obvious, we were well off. There was never a question of me wearing Madison's hand-me-downs. In fact, I was often treated like a dress-up doll by Madison and Anne during shopping trips. I continued school without dropping out and lived a life like any other kid. Thanks to our academic rivalry, Madison and I both got into the same national university, though in different faculties. This led to her landing a job at a major electronics manufacturer and me at a major bank, securing stable careers. Uncle and Anne joked,
Our daughters are elites, making us high school grads feel out of place. You could have slacked off a bit more.
but they were happier than anyone about our new beginnings. Then about 10 years ago, I married Matthew, my co-worker. I returned to Uncle's house to prepare for the birth of our child. Matthew and Uncle would talk to my belly every 15 minutes, saying things like,
I'm the daddy and I'm the grandpa.
while Anne and Madison teased, "The baby is scared of seeing your faces so close." It was a peaceful time. Then one day, something unexpected happened. The doorbell rang, and when Aunt went to answer it, there stood my birth parents and brother, whom I hadn't seen in over a decade. Wait, brother, right? Let me correct that. My birth parent and someone who looked like my brother. "What can I do for you?" Aunt asked. My birth mother replied, "We have a favor to ask." During this exchange, Matthew appeared behind Aunt.
Who are these people?
He asked. I answered, "My birth parents and something that resembles my brother." My husband asked,
What do you mean by something that resembles?
but I was at a loss myself. He looked so different from the brother I remembered. Amidst my confusion, my birth mother dropped a bombshell. "We saw Charlotte walking in town with her pregnant belly. Please give us the baby you're carrying."
What?
I was astounded by her outrageous demand, but Uncle, Aunt, Madison, and Matthew reacted before I could. It's true what they say, when you're too shocked, you can't even speak.
What do you mean by that?
Uncle immediately demanded, glaring at my birth mother. "This child, this failed son." Saying this, she grabbed the man who looked like my brother by the neck and dragged him in front of us. Yes, he had changed so much from when we lived together that it was no wonder he was barely recognizable. His chin had doubled and his face was covered with unkempt stubble. His belly looked like it had 3 layers, and even his wrists, which are usually hard to fatten, were chubby. His upper arms were so flabby they seemed like they could be trampolines. His hair was a mess, looking as if he had walked through a storm, and despite it being winter, he was wearing thin clothes. His shoes were scuffed, his sweater was dirty, and his jeans were so tattered they were beyond just being distressed. It was a critical condition, so should I say on the brink of death? How could he not be cold with all these gaps in his clothes? The brother I remembered, a slim and muscular soccer player, was nowhere to be seen. The man before me was unrecognizable, and I wanted to deny any blood relation to him. According to my birth mother, my brother had wanted to learn about society and didn't immediately take over the family business, instead working for a major corporation. He married his middle school sweetheart, but they divorced after it was discovered he was infertile. The cause was apparently due to a disease acquired from too much playing the field. He had been caught in his youthful infidelities and his wife left him. After his infertility was revealed and the divorce, my brother, facing the biggest failure of his life, quit his job and shut himself away, saying he didn't want to deal with people anymore. Now he rarely bathed, stayed in his room, and today was somehow dragged out by my birth mother like a prisoner, I thought, but kept silent. "Please, without this, our family name and the business will die out. Give us your child. This is the only way left."
Please, Charlotte, with this dirty son, we can't keep the house and business going. Help us.
They pleaded, tears and deep bows included. I coldly brushed off their pleading. Is your problem in your heads? And who exactly are you? Bowing to people who consider themselves strangers is just meddling.
You're our blood-related daughter. I didn't raise you to be this cold.
My father yelled, face red with anger. I don't remember being raised as a child by you. I cooked my own meals. Sure, you provided food, but I managed it all. What do you mean by raising? And you, people who couldn't even properly raise their daughter, now want to take her child? What kind of nerve do you have? My blunt words made them suggest, you could even cut ties with uncle's family and come back to us. That really rubbed me the wrong way, and they run a customer service business with this attitude. It's no wonder their business will collapse in their generation. They don't need an heir. I let out all my pent-up feelings. First of all, that dirty guy is your child. Discarding him because he's dirty like a mop? Aren't you the worst as parents? Think I would return to such a home? Ridiculous. You took care of a child only to discard him when convenient. So selfish. Children aren't jewelry. Don't discriminate against your own children based on their abilities. Love them equally. The failure before us became a failure because he never faced hardship. If you guys hadn't spoiled him, this wouldn't have happened. Sure, he's dirty and a failure now, but if you're so desperate, why not polish him up? He used to be excellent, and you stop wallowing in one setback. Lacking the spirit to face adversity, I was let down many times by you two standing here. My husband just smiled silently at my outburst. Uncle and Aunt looked at me with pride. Only Madison, my sister, was raising her fist high, as if to say, go on, more. To this, my birth mother said with a forced smile, I regret what I did to Charlotte. I couldn't do anything as a mother. Mother? I don't feel anything for that word. What? But I am your mother. Did you say something? A mosquito in the middle of winter? I pretended not to hear my birth mother's words, looking around as if searching for something. Frustrated by my reaction, she burst out, if you had been decent from the start, none of this would have happened. Just because you come crawling back when it suits you doesn't change your true nature. It's too late to pretend now. At my words, my birth mother's face turned pale. Listening silently until now, my birth father, frustrated with how things weren't going his way, grabbed my birth mother's hair and shouted, apologize to your daughter. I'm sorry, Charlotte. Please consider. Think positively. Positive? How could I? I don't care about being your heir or anything. If you want to continue the business, why don't you find some other genius blood to carry it on? I laughed at their plea. My father raised his fist to me, but my husband quickly shielded me. Aunt and Madison also moved to protect me, piling on top of me. Great teamwork.
You're the one who needs to stop, brother-in-law. Charlotte is our daughter now. If you make any more trouble, I'll call the police.
Uncle stared at my birth parents with an anger I had never seen before. Matthew, equally fierce, taunted my father.
Nice arm you have there. Pull too hard and it might just pop out of his socket, huh?
He smirked, holding my father's arm. Matthew had practiced boxing at the gym. Though his strength was more like a gentle gorilla, but a gorilla is a gorilla. Still, his formidable presence was undeniable. The corner of such a man's mouth turned up in a disgusting smile, and he aimed at shoulder joint. That must be scary. The man who looked like my brother shrank back, and my father gasped in fear.
If you bother my family again, I won't hold back.
Matthew glared at them.
We're sorry. We won't come near you again. Please forgive us.
My birth father and the man begged, bowing deeply. Is that all you have to say for your apology? Huh? They looked puzzled at my question. Oh, I see. After a moment of confusion, realization dawned on their faces.
We are sorry for everything. We treated you horribly, ruined your life.
They still don't get it. I don't think my life was ruined despite being mistreated because Uncle's family and my sister helped me. Uncle and Aunt's eyes welled up at my words. You're wrong. You're the sister here, Madison said, her eyes brimming with tears and a smile on her face. These people are truly my family. Thank you. There's nothing to forgive or not forgive, just memories to forget. Carrying grudges and resentments is too shameful to face my unborn child. I want to be a strong-willed mom. with a big heart, so I'll forget you never existed in my life, not then, not now. My birth parents realized their plan to take my child was completely futile. They let out a wail of despair. So much for not disturbing the neighbors. I refrained from saying that their shop would inevitably fail anyway. They would learn soon enough. Then Matthew suddenly spoke up.
Oh, I have one thing to thank you for.
We all looked puzzled, wondering why he would thank such people.
If you hadn't given birth to her, I wouldn't have met her. Thank you for bringing such a wonderful wife into the world. But please, give up on her and the baby.
After that, he urged us back inside.
Let's go back inside before Tammy gets cold.
True. These dirty people aren't good for prenatal influences. Madison agreed. You shouldn't say that. Aunt laughed.
All right, I'll sing a lullaby.
Uncle offered enthusiastically. That's too close for the baby, Dad. You can't sing. Madison and I joked. My birth parents and the man who resembled my brother could only stand as the door closed on them. Later, their shop inevitably went out of business. They ignored customer complaints about late orders and poor service, and gradually customers stopped coming. Now aging, my birth parents struggled with part-time work while supporting my unemployed brother. As for me, after having a boy on my first birth, I was blessed with 2 more boys. With 3 boys, it's nonstop chaos every day. They start fighting the moment I turn away, though it's never over anything serious. My brother's sweater is cooler. They argue, fighting over clothes that are the same design but different sizes. It's all the same anyway. I drew a nice picture, they would say, after using scrubbing bubbles to dry in the bathroom. Using up an entire can. Why use a whole can? Every few months, there's a scratch on the wallpaper. When Uncle and Aunt visit, Aunt would say, "Why don't you do it?" And Uncle gets roped into fixing it. Well, he willingly repairs the wallpaper out of kindness.
Matthew laments, I got a promotion, but all my money goes to fixing wallpapers. Stop breaking the expensive windows.
He says, squinting lovingly at our sons. I'm so glad we moved out of the rental and bought a house. By the way, Madison also got married and had a daughter. We're not rivals anymore. We remain sisters, cousins, and best mommy friends. Oh, and maybe a consultant for budget-friendly recipes. Surrounded by these caring and warm-hearted people, I live a very happy life every day.
Where's the $2K I send every month? Mom's all worn out. Exhausted, I respond, Did you check your mom's bank book? Huh? Bank book? Given his bewildered response, I sigh, remove my shoes, and retrieve a bank book from the living room. Here, your mom's bank book. She dropped it the last time she visited. He takes the bank book from me and checks it. His face turns pale as he looks at me. What? What's this? That's what I'm talking about. I pointed to the bank book. Besides the transfers from my account, there were deposits from another person. All deposited money was immediately transferred to another account under my mother-in-law's name. My husband sat down, weakly. He got up, looked at me, and said, We need to check with Mom. My name is Pam. I'm a 42-year-old working woman. My husband, Bob, is 3 years younger than me, and we've been married for about 2 years. We've worked at the same company for over a decade, but we've always just been colleagues. However, we once got assigned to work on a project which brought us closer together. After the project was completed, he invited me to dinner and confessed his feelings. Honestly, I'm a workaholic and I didn't have any plans on getting married. I did date when I was younger, but my work-first attitude always led to breakups. When I turned 35, I figured I was fine not getting married. Knowing all this, Bob still wanted to be with me. He even prepared a ring for what was supposed to be just a casual dinner. I was drawn to his earnestness and suggested we started dating, and so our relationship began. As we talked about family and more, I saw his kindness. He was supportive, allowing me to throw myself into work. I thought, he is the man for me, and proposed to him. The ring he had initially prepared became our wedding ring. Bob's father had disappeared one day, and his mother had raised him single-handedly. It's hard for a single, unemployed mother to find a good job. She held down several jobs just to make ends meet. When Bob got a job, his mom broke down from overwork and could no longer work long hours. Now she barely gets by on her part-time earnings in an old apartment. Bob's company required him to move frequently, so he left home when he got his job. He was worried about his mother, who could hardly work, and sent her $1.5K every month. And it seems like nothing has changed since he transitioned into his current job. He once offered to live with his mother-in-law since his company was near her house, but she declined, saying she didn't want to intrude on her son's privacy. Indeed, even when he suddenly suggested for us to live with his mother, she refused, stating that she did not want to disrupt our newlywed life. I was taken aback by the sudden proposal, and while my husband looked downcast next to me, I was honestly relieved that she turned us down. Although I think my mother-in-law is a good person, I was a bit anxious about living with her immediately after getting married. When we returned home, I told my husband that I was upset with him, as he made a proposal without even talking to me about it first. We then agreed on discussing everything before making any decisions from there on out. I understood that my husband was just concerned about his mother, so I suggested we keep in regular contact and visit her on weekends. In addition, I spoke to my husband about increasing our financial support to her, given that we were both working after getting married, and we decided to increase it to $2K. My mother-in-law was tearful with joy, and we both put more effort into our work, hoping that she would be able to spend her old age happily after all her hardships. However, my mother-in-law's life didn't seem to be improving at all, and as the deposit day approached each month, she began to make calls demanding the money. I initially thought that she must be in trouble too, but it started to feel a bit gloomy as it continued every month. What's more, she called us without hesitation. She would say, "Have you deposited my money for this month yet?" as if she was entitled to it. While I don't think she means any harm, I felt uncomfortable with it and ended up complaining to my husband about it. "Hey, don't we get calls from your mom every month? It's a bit when she calls like that without even thanking us." "How can you be like that? Mom can't work and she's having a hard time." I guess my complaint got on his nerves. My husband unusually snapped back at me. Since then, any time I try to discuss our financial support for his mother, my husband becomes stubborn and the conversation leads to nowhere. Just for how long are we going to continue sending money to his mother? I feel bad, but I caught myself being upset over it. I'm sure my husband is aware of my thoughts, and that's why he's behaving this way. When I think about it, I feel like I'm a cold-hearted person and couldn't say anything more than that. About 2 years after we started sending money to her, my husband got a call from his mother. His expression was dark as he responded with, and it was clear that he was hearing bad news. "What? You've been scammed?" I was surprised by my husband's words and stood up from my chair. I thought his mother was a strong person, even though she was physically weak, and at the same time I was very concerned about how much she had lost. "Hey, what happened to your mom?" I asked my husband, who had just hung up the phone. With a dark expression, my husband began to explain. "Actually, it seems like Mom got scammed. Apparently, she got an email, and when she opened the URL, it automatically registered her and demanded payment. So she paid for it." "That's a one-click fraud scam. I wonder why your mom didn't call us right away when she opened the site." At my words, my husband Bob's eyebrows raised. Perhaps I'd spoken harshly, even though I thought it was too late for regrets. "She told me that she couldn't call you because you've been cold to her recently. After worrying about it, she even borrowed money to pay it. Now she can't even pay this month's rent or water bill. She called and asked me if we could send her more money this month." With that, Bob pulled out his checkbook and began to calculate. I may have been a bit cold with her when she's called recently, but to be blamed to this extent. Anyway, we have to do something about Mom's debt. I also brought out my own checkbook and opened it next to Bob. "How much was your mom's debt?" Apparently it's $250K. We need to do something." The amount that came out of Bob's mouth left me speechless. No matter how elderly my mother-in-law is, where on earth did she borrow $250K from? She doesn't even own a house, so there's no way a bank would lend her such a large amount. If that's the case, she might have borrowed it from a sketchy source. I decided then and told Bob, let's pay back the debt in one installment. Bob looked at me with a start. He probably didn't expect me to suggest that. Looking into his eyes, I continued, because honestly, if you think about who would lend your mom such a large amount of money immediately, I can only think of non-bank lenders. If we don't pay it back quickly, the interest will just inflate the amount. Bob nodded several times as if he understood. Thankfully, having lived frugally with little desire for material possessions and having been single for a long time, we had a substantial savings. Since Bob had also saved up a decent amount, we decided to split the repayment between us. Bob thanked me many times, bowing his head. When I contacted my mother-in-law about the repayment, she thanked me over and over again on the other end of the phone. I heard her sniffling a few times, so she may have been crying. Although it's a large sum, at least we could pay back the debt for now, and she's promised to always consult us in the future, so let's let bygones be bygones. Even though I thought that, there was something that didn't quite add up. When my husband brought the money to his mother, she never revealed where she'd borrowed it. He kept saying, since we're the ones providing the money, we should know where it's coming from. But all she would say was, I've forgotten the name of the company I borrowed from, but they'll come directly to collect the money, so it's okay. Thank you. He wondered, is she starting to lose her memory? Looking worried, he suggested we should take her to the hospital together sometime. However, she absolutely hates hospitals, so she stubbornly refused to go. That's why we had to plan on how to get her to go to the hospital. Around the time we'd mostly worked out the plan to take my mother-in-law to the hospital, a call came through to my husband's cell phone. The caller was Alyssa, my mother-in-law's sister, who lives in a far-off place. Hello, Bob. It's been a while. Can we talk? Hello, Aunt Alyssa. It's been a long time. Yes. What's the matter? Alyssa is my mother-in-law's older sister. She's a very responsible woman who married into a landowning family and now actively takes part in their business. She dislikes dishonesty and can be stern, but she's also very kind to her nephew Bob and me, his wife. Your mother called and asked me if she could borrow some money. Are you sending her enough each month? She seems to be struggling to pay her electric bills. We were shocked. We always make sure to send money each month and had just paid off her debt. We thanked Alyssa, then hurriedly called my mother-in-law and brought her to our house. She arrived in a disheveled state, wearing an old t-shirt, looking like she was clearly struggling financially. Mom, why did you ask Alyssa for money without telling us? I didn't ask for any money. She just asked how I was doing, so I told her that I'm not as well off as you guys, but I'm getting by. Her expression didn't seem like she was lying, so we exchanged glances. Could Alyssa have misunderstood? Maybe her complaining sounded like a plea for help. We reassured Alyssa that we were sending money to her every month. Mom, do you have other debts? Should we increase the amount we're sending? Well, she isn't really saying anything. Let's check her income and expenses next time. She might have entered into some contract we don't know about. Let's decide about increasing her support funds after that. My husband agreed with a nod. I put our checkbook, which was still out, back into the drawer, then finished up the rest of the housework. A few days later, I had to work on my day off, so we decided my husband would go to his mother's house alone. I asked him to casually bring up the topic of going to the hospital with her, then headed to work. I was swamped with troubleshooting at work, so much so that I didn't have time for lunch, but I managed to text my husband asking, "How's your mother doing?" I noticed a missed call from my husband in the evening on my way home from work. Judging by the lack of any accompanying message, I figured it must be something he wanted to discuss in person. With that in mind, I texted back, "On my way, home in 10, and hurried back. I'm home. As I opened the front door and announced my arrival, my husband was there, standing in the foyer, his face beet red. Sorry I couldn't take your call. How was your mother?" At my words, my husband's face went even redder, and he yelled at me. "Where's the $2K I send every month? Mom's all worn out." Feeling foggy from fatigue, I only managed to ask, "Did you check her bank book?" "Huh? Bank book?" My husband looked taken aback. I sighed, took off my shoes, and fetched a bank book from the living room. "Here, this is her bank book. She dropped it the last time she was here." My husband took the bank book from me and looked through it. His face went pale, and he looked up at me. "What? What is this?" "Well, that's what I'm trying to tell you." I pointed to the bank book as I explained. Not only were there transfers from my account listed in the bank book, but also transfers from another person. Moreover, all of the deposited money was immediately transferred to another account under my mother-in-law's name. My husband slumped down on the spot, clearly overwhelmed. However, he quickly got back up and looked straight at me, saying, "We should confront my mother directly." With that, he called her number, but she didn't answer. Although she usually picks up immediately, something seemed off this time. We decided to go over to her house. "Hey, my mom's mailbox is sealed shut with duct tape. Do you see it?" Upon arriving at my mother-in-law's apartment, my husband pointed out an unusual sight. No way. I felt a sinking feeling in my stomach as I looked at the mailbox, indeed, sealed with duct tape. What could have happened to my mother-in-law? Let's go ask the landlord. So we went to visit the landlady. The landlord, who also lives in the same apartment complex, is a friendly old lady. There, we were to learn a shocking truth. She moved to that high-rise condominium over there, didn't she? She was bragging about how her sons bought it for her. How envious. Our eyes widened in surprise. The only son my mother-in-law has is my husband, but we didn't purchase any condominium. After thanking the landlord, we decided to head over to the condominium she mentioned. The condominium was a new building and the tallest one in the neighborhood. The price of the units was exorbitantly high compared to other condos in the vicinity. How on earth could my mother afford to buy a place like this? My husband gaped at the towering building. I had a sinking feeling in my stomach. Shortly thereafter, we saw a figure approaching the condominium. It was my mother-in-law. Unaware of us, she was happily humming a tune, skipping along with brand shopping bags in her hands. "Mom, what are you doing?" My husband was the first one to rush out. At first, my mother-in-law stopped in surprise but quickly continued walking towards the condominium. My husband blocked her path. Looking annoyed, she looked up at him and retorted, "What? What do you mean, what? You told us you had no money. Then how are you living in a place like this? What's with those bags?" "Stop nagging. You're disturbing the neighbors. Of course, no matter how much money you have, it's never enough to indulge in luxuries," she replied dismissively. Shaking, my husband somehow squeezed out a response. "Were you lying? You said you couldn't work. We thought we were helping you out of gratitude for raising me. Pam even helped. You're so noisy about money. A mother's happiness is her son's happiness. Isn't it enough that I'm happy?" Looking at my mother-in-law's snide smile, I realized she was not the person I knew. My husband must have been seeing this side of her for the first time too. He stood beside me, his face pale. My mother-in-law brushed past my stunned husband and with a casual "see ya" disappeared inside. My husband just stood there, dumbfounded. The realization that his mother, who he had cherished so much, had betrayed him was just too much to bear. I could sense his shock, and it felt like my chest was being crushed. I looked at my husband's hand and suggested, "Let's get back at her." He was taken aback at first, but after a moment, he nodded in agreement. From then on, we started planning our strategy. First, we decided to stop sending her money and begin tracking where her money was coming from. To our surprise, when we hired a detective to investigate around my mother-in-law, we discovered that she was receiving a steady sum of money each month from a certain individual. We got in touch with this person and informed him about my mother-in-law's situation. 2 weeks later, my mother-in-law called my husband. "Hey, what are you meddling in?" My mother-in-law's shouting voice came through the phone loud enough for me to hear. With a sigh, my husband responded matter-of-factly, "What do you mean by meddling? You told us that Dad found another woman and left. You told us that you couldn't get in touch with him. All lies. We heard everything from Dad." The person we contacted turned out to be my husband's father, in other words, my father-in-law. My husband and I had been told that my father-in-law was a womanizer who left for another woman and didn't even know where he was, but it turned out he was living in his ancestral home far away. The reason for the divorce was my mother-in-law's gambling problem and embezzlement. The moment my father-in-law said he was taking over the family farming business, she had brought up divorce, and he readily agreed. He had actually intended to take my husband with him, but my mother-in-law had taken him and disappeared. When he finally found where my mother-in-law and husband were, he was told that my husband despised him and didn't want to see him. Thus, to fulfill his duty as a father, he had been sending money ever since. She lied that we were living together even after I became an adult and kept demanding money from Dad. Dad was shocked. We told Dad he doesn't need to pay her anymore. Even the money he paid after I was of age, he doesn't need to ask for it back, but he should never get involved with you ever again. I could hear my mother-in-law mutter weakly, "That can't be." My husband dealt her another blow with his icy voice. "We won't be sending you money anymore either. We're going to move too, so we don't want to see you again." "How can you say that? What am I supposed to do about my living expenses? You need to repay me for the effort I put into raising you." My mother-in-law's shrill voice echoed out from the phone. With another sigh, my husband responded stoically, "I think I've repaid enough for being raised. I've been using my entire bonus for your expenses for over 15 years since I started working. From now on, I'm going to use it for my own family." My husband said that and looked at me. I could hear my mother-in-law still shouting something over the phone, but my husband calmly hung up without paying her any mind. The retaliation wasn't over with this. We began preparations for a second round. About a week after my mother-in-law called, she called again. She was clearly flustered and incoherent, but in summary, she was complaining about the sale of her condo. In fact, as we investigated, it turned out that my husband had become the guardian of his mother. Not only that, the loan for the purchase of the condo had been taken out in his name. Therefore, even though the condo was in my mother-in-law's name, it was no problem for my husband to sell it, according to the lawyer, and so we arranged to sell the condo. "The condo is mine, isn't it? Why are you selling it without my permission?" "We bought it with our money, okay? We even checked with a lawyer, so it's legal." Still, my mother-in-law kept demanding to have the condo back. Each time, my husband reiterated that a buyer had been found and that the sale proceeds were our money. Still, my mother-in-law was far from satisfied, and from the other end of the phone, we could hear her harsh words. Unable to stand it any longer, I took over the phone from my husband. "Hello, mother-in-law. Please, stop being so stubborn. You're causing too much problems for us. The one who's in trouble is me. How dare you, Pam? I thought you were wealthy, since you're older than my son, which is why I approved of you marrying Bob in the first place. But, oh my lord, you're nothing but a god of pestilence." As soon as my mother-in-law shouted that, I burst into laughter. Perhaps she never expected me to laugh. My mother-in-law, who had been so loud, fell silent. I continued the conversation while laughing. "Mother-in-law, you're too careless. Setting up your son as a guardian and making him the debtor of the loan is like asking him to sell it. You're really clumsy, aren't you? Anyway, now that we can get our money back, we're just hoping we don't have to deal with you anymore." Ignoring my mother-in-law's, "Wait, hold on," the other end of the phone, I hung up. My husband, who had been nervously watching, seemed to relax a bit when I smiled at him. 2 weeks later, my mother-in-law safely moved out of the condo, and we were informed that a new buyer had moved in. We breathed a sigh of relief when we confirmed that the sale proceeds had been successfully transferred to my husband's bank account. By the way, we felt bad about her becoming homeless, so as a severance payment, we rented the same room in the old apartment for her. So my mother-in-law's new home is her old apartment. The landlord is a nice lady but loves to gossip, so she'll probably spread all sorts of rumors. But our retaliation doesn't end here. In fact, we had another plan in progress. It was carried out as my mother-in-law moved back into her old apartment. My husband's phone fell silent after an hour of non-stop ringing. And then, about 2 hours later, one person called my husband's phone. "Hello? Yes, thank you. We appreciate your help." After my husband hung up the phone with those words, he let out a deep sigh. Then he gave me a thumbs up, a signal for all good. The person he was on the phone with was my mother-in-law's sister, Alyssa. Once we found out about my mother-in-law's incident, we immediately reached out to Alyssa. She was outraged when she learned about everything and even introduced us to a lawyer. Furthermore, she decided to keep an eye on our old apartment after we moved back. My sister may be a handful, but she used to be a sweetheart. It hurt a bit to see her like this, but after our plan was executed, Alyssa advised us to cut ties and live our lives happily. We decided to take her advice. On the day of the move, my mother-in-law did not lift a finger, even when the movers showed up. That's when Alyssa stepped in. She forcefully made my mother-in-law pack up amidst her protests. "You're all tricking my sister. I'm the victim here." Alyssa, frustrated but determined, forced her sister to return to her old apartment. Upon arrival, my mother-in-law naturally resisted, but when Alyssa threatened to ask for an immediate refund of the money she had lent, my mother-in-law reluctantly obeyed. In fact, my mother-in-law had been extorting not only my husband and me, but Alyssa as well for a large amount of money. Alyssa, not knowing any of this, had been helping her, thinking about the struggles her sister had to go through while raising her son all by herself. It's unforgivable that my mother-in-law tricked such a kind-hearted woman. Alyssa, however, has no intention of letting my mother-in-law keep the money she has lent. It seems she's made arrangements for my mother-in-law to repay her from her monthly paycheck. The amount of aid my mother-in-law received from Alyssa was considerable. It's such a hefty sum that it's doubtful whether she could repay it even if she worked her whole life. However, my mother-in-law has hardly ever worked, and even part-time jobs are hard to come by. Even when she does manage to land a job, she quits before long. Alyssa always pushes her to get back out there. Eventually, my mother-in-law ended up working part-time daily at a store owned by one of Alyssa's friends. My mother-in-law had lied about being frail and sickly, but an enforced visit to the hospital proved there was nothing wrong with her. She was told to work as much as possible. My mother-in-law, who had lied about working ever since my husband was a child while actually lazing around, was having a hard time. I heard she was already complaining on her first day. When the news of the plan's success came in, Alyssa said, laughing, "She hardly has any willpower, that one." As for us, we moved as soon as we got word from Alyssa that she had shoved my mother-in-law into her apartment. We relocated near my parents' home, a distance that now requires air travel from my mother-in-law's place. This has helped us mentally, and we're living peacefully. As we both can work remotely, there was no issue in continuing our jobs. My parents' constant presence since we moved has led to my husband bonding with my father. We had agreed that we wouldn't mind not having children, but soon after we settled down, I fell ill and found out I was pregnant at the hospital. My husband was surprised too, but now he's fascinated by our growing child with every checkup. I feel the same and promptly applied for maternity leave. We plan to take turns nurturing our child with abundant love.
I always thought that being targeted for your life was something that only happened in dramas or comics. Never did I imagine that I'd actually find myself in such a situation. The events of that day are still etched in my mind, accompanied by a deep sense of fear. Today, I want to share the most sinister form of harassment I've experienced from my mother-in-law, or Mill for short. My name is Catherine. I'm 30 years old. I'm a homemaker taking care of my family. I live with my husband Tyler, who's a sales rep, and our 10-year-old son Lauren. I met Tyler 3 years ago through a mutual acquaintance at a company where I was working at the time. He's a good guy, previously married. Want to meet him? I was hesitant at first, being introduced to a divorced man with a child while I was single. But when I met Tyler and Lauren, they were both so genuine and adorable that I was completely smitten. Tyler and I hit it off immediately and got married within 6 months. Lauren quickly warmed up to me, and the three of us became a close-knit family. Weekend drives, family camping trips. For 3 years, every day was fulfilling. Finally, the moment we'd been waiting for arrived. Big news, you two! We're having a baby! Really? Thank you, Catherine. Is it a boy or a girl? It seemed like we're expecting a girl. I couldn't wait to hold my own child in my arms. Let's do our best together. I'm going to be a new mom again. I talked to my unborn child every day. Everything was going smoothly. I thought so, and never doubted it. Or so I thought, until my father-in-law, who had been seriously ill, passed away, and my mother-in-law started acting out. About 2 months after his passing, mother-in-law began summoning me to her home more frequently. Our apartment is only a 15-minute drive from her place, but being called over almost every day was stressful. Don't worry about coming every day. My legs should get better soon. Of course, mother-in-law. Let's get started. At that time, mother-in-law had injured her leg and was using a cane, even indoors. As her daughter-in-law, it was my role to help with errands and other chores. I didn't mind the work itself. I'm not one to shy away from physical labor. The problem was the constant complaints about Tyler's ex-wife while I was working. She was a terrible wife, always timid and inefficient. She couldn't cook to save her life. Meat was always tough and the soup was too spicy. Even her cleaning was sloppy. She couldn't even use a mop properly, let alone wring out a cloth. Her laundry skills were also lacking. She wouldn't hand wash items that needed it. The complaints were incessant and malicious. I had never explicitly asked why Tyler and his ex-wife divorced, but I wouldn't have been surprised if mother-in-law had something to do with it. My suspicions would soon become a reality. It was around the time I'd reached my 9th month of pregnancy, and my belly had grown quite large. I got a call from mother-in-law. Would you like to have dinner together? Could you prepare my portion too? At that time, it wasn't uncommon for the 4 of us to share meals. But that evening, I got an urgent message from Tyler. I'll be home late tonight. Go ahead and have dinner without me. Mother-in-law was clearly displeased that she wouldn't get to see her grandson. What's with this meat? It's so tough to chew. Did you buy the cheap stuff? Well, we can't always afford the best. And this soup tastes like water, worse than hospital food. I tried to keep the salt low. The atmosphere at the dinner table was terrible, thanks to mother-in-law's constant complaints. Lauren seemed quieter than usual, as if he wanted to finish eating and leave. After dinner, while I was doing the dishes, mother-in-law started whispering something from behind me. The bigger your belly gets, the further Tyler and Lauren drift away from me. Mother-in-law, is something wrong? He used to rely on me a lot right after the divorce. I'm sorry, I can't hear you well over the water. Everyone's leaving me! Mother-in-law? You're in the way. You're not needed. I turned around to see mother-in-law raising a frying pan. Get lost, you worthless wife! What are you doing? Tyler's shout stopped mother-in-law in her tracks.
Stop it, Mom! What are you trying to do to Catherine?
Tyler had come home just in time. I was so shocked that my legs gave out, and I collapsed. Memories from the past few months flooded back into my mind. It started around my 6th month of pregnancy. Mother-in-law began visiting our home more frequently, making me constantly on edge. I never knew when she might drop by unannounced. I couldn't afford any slip-ups or oversights in my housework. Even my clothing couldn't be too casual. It was a series of restless days. Most of the conversations with mother-in-law revolved around my pregnancy. How's everything going? It's a girl, right? Is everything on track? So far, so good. I'm keeping a close eye on my weight. I was initially glad she seemed so concerned. At first, I honestly thought so. But as time went on, her behavior became increasingly unsettling. I had been strictly advised by my obstetrician to avoid excessive sugar intake. Too high of blood sugar levels could affect the baby. I thought I had communicated this to my mother-in-law repeatedly. Yet, she would say, "Here are some sweets I brought, and I got some fruit. It was on sale." It was hard to refuse when she offered them with a smile. And every time I did refuse, explaining why, she'd get clearly upset. As my belly grew, mother-in-law's interference intensified. "I can do the cleaning. You should relax, Catherine." Such offers seemed helpful at first, but when I looked around the room after she left, wait, where's our photo from last year's trip? The whole frame is gone. Important items would go missing, and quite frequently. "Oh, sorry, Catherine. I broke another plate." "It's okay, mother-in-law. Are you hurt?" "I'll clean it up." Dishes and glasses would get broken. My distrust of mother-in-law grew stronger and more irrepressible. Naturally, I talked to Tyler about it. "Do you think she doesn't like me deep down? I feel some hostility from her."
I'll subtly check it out. Sorry you have to go through this.
Thanks to Tyler, who was always on my side, I managed to get by. Around my 7th month of pregnancy, my belly had grown significantly, and the strain on my back was increasing. Despite this, mother-in-law started summoning me to her house frequently again. She'd make me do chores, citing her aching legs or bad stomach as reasons. Sometimes she'd even say she was going out with friends and needed me to handle the housework. If I tried to resist, saying I was also struggling, she'd get furious. "Pregnancy isn't an illness. How cold-hearted. What a disappointment." Doing the chores, even if they were tough, was better than facing her wrath. While I was enduring and doing the housework, she'd say, "Why the sour face? I'm making you exercise for your own good." She claimed that lying around all day was bad for both the baby and me. I understood her point, but I wanted to do things at my own pace. Unable to argue or show my feelings, I went through truly difficult days. If chores extended into lunchtime, I'd eat at mother-in-law's house. Sometimes she'd prepare lunch for me. But when she did, "Here you go. It's just store-bought, but it's not bad." The food she served was clearly spoiled. If I didn't eat it or pointed out it was rotten, she'd scold me. "If you don't like it, don't eat it. After I went through all of the trouble of preparing it." She frowns and taunts me. No amount of apologizing would make her forgive me. During these tough times, Lauren was my emotional and physical support.
"I can do the mopping for you. Bending over must be hard, right?"
"Thank you, Lauren. You're a lifesaver." Lauren was a perceptive and smart kid, always helping me out. The only one who wasn't fun was mother-in-law. She always tried to win her grandson over. "How about some candy?" "Never mind, Catherine." She tried to lure Lauren with juice or an interesting cartoon. But Lauren would say, "I'm good, don't worry about it." Then she'd say something cold. The colder she was to me, the more she was disliked by her grandson. Of course, Tyler was always on my side. Whenever he had a day off, he'd visit mother-in-law's house and scold her multiple times.
Stop making Catherine do all the work and feeding her spoiled food.
I've never done such a thing. Tyler, you're being deceived.
What would Catherine gain from deceiving me? You're really losing it, Mom.
Are you saying I have dementia or what? And so the relationship between mother-in-law and us deteriorated day by day. Around my 8th month of pregnancy, when I was mentally and physically drained, a stranger approached me while I was shopping. Excuse me, you're Tyler's wife, right? I'm actually his ex-wife. Unexpectedly, I was approached by Tyler's ex-wife. She said she had something to talk about, so we went to a nearby cafe. Just like mother-in-law had described, Sophia was a quiet and reserved person. But what she told me was unbelievable, completely opposite to her demeanor. She tried to take my life. What? She tried to kill you? By she, I mean mother-in-law, of course. Sophia said. She told me that she had faced various forms of harassment from mother-in-law while pregnant with Lauren. Being fed spoiled food, forced to do endless chores, and scolded if she resisted. It was a miracle that Lauren was born healthy in such a toxic environment. The harassment continued even after giving birth. I was treated like an intruder. Mother-in-law took Lauren away from Sophia and kept piling on the chores. Then one day, I felt a strong impact on my head and collapsed. A pot that was stored up high had fallen. That's what mother-in-law told the authorities. But I couldn't believe that was all there was to it. Sophia suspected mother-in-law had done something to her. Tyler couldn't change the situation. So Sophia, sensing danger, chose to divorce him. She left Lauren with Tyler due to her financial instability. Sophia repeatedly warned me to be cautious around mother-in-law. Please be careful. Take whatever precautions you can. Thank you for your concern. I'll do my best. When I told her how wonderfully Lauren had grown up, Sophia cried tears of joy. For her sake, too, I had to protect my family's well-being. I decided to take all necessary precautions. About a month later, that dreadful dinner happened. Tyler took the frying pan away from mother-in-law, who shook her head, saying, I didn't do anything. I was just putting the pan away. That's when Lauren, hiding behind Tyler, glared at mother-in-law. She's lying. I saw it. Grandma's lying.
I agree. It looked like you were trying to hit Catherine.
No, you're mistaken. Shall we check then? Check? What do you mean? I operated my phone and launched a special app. What? This room is on camera? I had cameras installed in the living room and kitchen. It was a precaution I took after Sophia's warning. When I played back the footage, there was mother-in-law trying to hit me with the frying pan.
Mom, explain yourself.
Cornered, mother-in-law was now almost in tears. I was just jealous that you were taken away from me. Her reasoning was utterly selfish. She had hoped to live with Tyler again after his divorce, but was disappointed when he remarried so quickly. She felt robbed of the chance to have her son and grandson all to herself. Mother-in-law kept repeating these selfish claims. How dare you come into our lives and steal everything? Both Lauren and I felt disgusted by her words. Tyler's face turned red with anger. How could you say that to my mom? Apologize. Apologize now. That day, after a heated argument, mother-in-law was kicked out of our house. Later, Tyler declared he would sever all ties with his mother.
I will never see Mom again, no matter what. And no financial support either.
Wait, please, I'm sorry. I've learned my lesson. It was no surprise that Tyler was furious. Part of his anger stemmed from the fact that I had told him everything Sophia had shared with me. Until then, Tyler had never thought his mother could harm Sophia. Realizing he had been wrong all along, he was visibly frustrated.
Don't ever show your face to us again. Got it?
With that final word, mother-in-law left, tears in her eyes. A few weeks later, I gave birth to a baby girl without any stress. Life has been peaceful, and we're enjoying our time with the newborn. As for mother-in-law, she seems to be struggling financially since losing her son's support. She's working part-time, but is reportedly having a hard time dealing with harassment from a younger manager. I heard this directly from mother-in-law when she called to ask for financial help. Life is so hard for me right now. I'm barely getting by. I understand, but we have our own expenses with raising a child. Please, can't you help? Even $200 a month, or $100 if that's too much. I'm sorry, I have to hang up now. Please don't call us again. Ignoring her pleas to wait, I ended the call and immediately blocked her number. After that, mother-in-law apparently took on more work. She's working mornings at a fast food restaurant and afternoons stocking shelves and working the cash register at a supermarket. I heard this from Sophia when we met up recently after a long time. I saw her at the supermarket by chance, and she looked so thin, like a different person, like a zombie. She didn't even notice Sophia standing right in front of her. If only mother-in-law had been kind, things wouldn't have come to this. It's a pitiful situation, but she brought it upon herself. I hope she reflects on her actions and finds a way to make it through life.
My name is Sarah, a 35-year-old stay-at-home mom. I married my high school sweetheart, Tom, and we moved for his job, now living in the next town over. I'm currently pregnant, just about ready to hit my 9th month, but circumstances have brought me back to my childhood home. The reason? My younger brother's wedding. He called to share the news that he was getting married. I knew he had been seeing someone for a while, but it seems they've decided to tie the knot. As his only sister, I'd love to be there for my little brother's wedding, but with my due date right around the corner, it's unpredictable what could happen. After discussing it with my family, we decided it would be best if I sat this one out. Since today is the eve of the wedding and my brother is returning home, I brought over some gifts as a way to celebrate, which is why I've returned home today. As I walked in, I found my brother lounging in the living room, sipping his coffee. Seeing me, his face lit up with a big smile. Wow, Sarah, it's been a while. Your belly's gotten so big. Looking at my pregnant belly, he seemed quite surprised. I know, right? I've gotten quite big. It's even a task to get out of bed now. My brother has always loved kids and works as a kindergarten teacher. He's very excited about my baby coming. Wow, this is really amazing. Hey, can I touch your belly? He asked for permission to touch my pregnant belly, to which I replied, sure, go ahead. I didn't mind him touching my belly, so I let him go ahead. However, little did I know at the time that this would trigger an unthinkable incident. As my brother gingerly laid his hand on my belly, the baby inside gave his hand a gentle kick from within. Wow, this is so moving. I can't wait to have a kid of my own someday. You have so much to look forward to. I replied just as we were having this friendly conversation. What on earth are you doing? Suddenly a young woman stormed into the living room, staring at me with a fierce expression. As I was trying to figure out how to explain, an immense force struck my cheek. I didn't realize I had been hit until a moment later. Unprepared for such an attack, I stumbled backwards and landed hard on my butt. If that wasn't enough, the next moment a loud pop was followed by water leaking from below. I realized that my water had broken due to the fall and my belly began to hurt from the shock. Ouch, it hurts, please help. Between being struck and my water breaking, I was in so much shock that I passed out then and there. When I woke up, I found myself lying in bed staring blankly at the ceiling. Where am I? Oh no, the baby. Is the baby okay? In an instant, I felt a wave of fear washing over me. My belly, which had been swollen until recently, now appeared smaller with an IV tube attached to my arm. Oh, are you awake? A sudden voice startled me. In the room were an elderly couple I didn't know and the woman who had pushed me earlier. The woman was looking over with a sullen face. Who are you? I managed to ask. The situation was already causing me to panic, and seeing strangers in the room made it even more confusing. Sorry for the confusion. We're the parents of Luna, your brother's bride-to-be. The parents of my brother's bride-to-be were grinning at me. That's not important right now. I need a doctor. As I reached to press the nurse call button, my hand was suddenly held back. What are you doing? Let go of me. This time, the bride's mother interfered. It's okay. We'll call for you. But before that, there's something we need to discuss. I couldn't understand why they wanted to talk before calling a doctor. I needed to know what was going on as soon as possible. I don't have time to talk with you. My baby is missing. Oh, that? The baby's in the incubator. You have nothing to worry about. Everything is under the doctor's control. Then they suggested a settlement. Their daughter was young. They said that I should forgive her this time because of her youth. Are you kidding me? I can't do that. The absurdity of it all led me to shout out, "What are you talking about? You don't need to be so tough. You're just poor after all, aren't you? You want money from the settlement, right? Don't hold back." The three of them seemed to assume that I was poor and that I would certainly agree to a settlement if they offered enough money. But I couldn't accept that. They had disregarded my life and thought they could resolve it with money. I won't. I'm ready to fight. Earlier, you referred to my baby as that. I will never settle with someone who doesn't even apologize. Seeing my firm stance, they began to show their impatience. They increased the amount they offered, 1 million, 2 million, but no matter what they said, I wouldn't agree. Enough is enough. Because of you, my wedding was canceled, you know. If anything, I'm the victim here. If you don't agree to the settlement, I'll demand payment for the cancellation of the wedding. Just when I was at my wit's end, not understanding their pressure, and tears started welling up, a voice rang out. "We've heard the whole story." With those words, my husband Tom and my brother suddenly walked into the hospital room. Both of them glared at the trio with a menacing look. "Hey, where have you been? I've been calling you since earlier. I received a text that our wedding is canceled tomorrow, but there's no explanation. Explain it properly to me," Luna said as she tried to run towards my brother. "Don't come any closer. You're not my bride." Huh? She was taken aback by the sudden comment and stopped in her tracks. "What do you mean by not my bride? Aren't we supposed to be a couple since we're getting married? Are you joking about me not being your bride?" Was she not understanding the situation, or did she think my brother was just messing around? Her face didn't seem to register the gravity of the situation yet. "Do you think this is a joke? You let your emotions get the best of you, hit Sarah without hearing her out, and she ended up going into labor due to that. All you did was look down on her while she was in pain. Didn't even try to help, did you?" That's right, she stood there with a faint smile looking down at me in pain, offering no help whatsoever until I passed out. I was just so shocked that I couldn't move. It's not like I didn't want to help." She insisted that she had intended to help but was too shocked to move. "Really? But you seem to be quite relaxed looking at your smartphone and grinning. If you were really too shocked to move, you wouldn't be leisurely checking your phone, would you?" She must not have thought that we saw that. I didn't miss the momentary twitch in her face. "Well, I didn't mean any harm, but more importantly, our wedding was ruined, right? Don't you care about that? Don't you feel bad about the inconvenience caused to the people who came from afar? All because of that." Just like her mother, she referred to what happened to me and my baby as that. That word was more unforgivable than anything else. It wasn't just me who felt that way. Tom did too. "I'm sorry, but on the way here, we filed a complaint. We can't let this go." Their smug faces from earlier dropped, gaping in surprise at Tom's words. "Wait a minute, what do you mean you filed a complaint?" She collapsed and went into labor on her own, right? If anything, our wedding got ruined. Shouldn't we be the ones demanding compensation? Hearing words like compensation and complaint, Luna became flustered, desperately wanting to marry my brother. "Brian, don't you think that's a bit harsh? Our daughter didn't mean any harm. Please forgive her." "Yeah, and isn't that woman also to blame? My daughter thought she was your mistress and got jealous. I think you bear some responsibility too." It seems Luna thought I was my brother's mistress, but he had shown her my photo in advance, so could there have been a misunderstanding? Even if there was, it's absolutely not acceptable to hit a pregnant woman. No matter what the reason is, hitting a pregnant woman is unforgivable. You haven't even apologized to Sarah once, have you? Why would I want to marry someone like that? Don't joke around. My brother raised his voice and Luna, looking pale, came over to me. I understand. I apologize. I'm very sorry for what happened. See, I apologize now, so please reconsider. It seemed like she was only apologizing reluctantly because she didn't want the marriage to be called off. "No, it's too late for that. After hearing what you said, I can't even consider marrying you. I'll demand payment for the cancellation of the wedding and compensation. Stay out of my life." No matter what she said, my brother's mind was made up, and neither Tom nor I intended to withdraw the complaint. Despite other patients being around, all they cared about was not wanting to get divorced. They were desperate to have their wedding, worried about face saving for their relatives and colleagues. It didn't seem like they felt any remorse for the terrible thing they'd done to us. And so, my brother and Luna broke up. I felt sorry for him, but don't worry about it, Sarah. Actually, I'm relieved. I didn't marry such a heartless woman. If it's meant to be, I'll meet someone wonderful. His positive words reassured me a bit. Later, the doctor came to see us. The baby was fine, and I was told that we could go home together once my condition improved. Although I fell on my butt, my lower body was in pain, but other than that, there was no abnormality in my bones. The only pain was from the scar left by the emergency cesarean section. When I went to see my baby, they were crying energetically in their small bed. The moment I heard their voice, tears of relief streamed down my face. Thus, after several days in the hospital with my child, my health returned. And since neither my child nor I had abnormalities in our health, we finally reached the day of discharge. On the day of discharge, it seems that my husband Tom and my brother were coming to the hospital by car. I was waiting at the hospital entrance holding my child. "It's all right, sweetie. Daddy will be here soon. You must be excited to go home." While I was soothing my child, that's when it happened. Ah! Suddenly, Luna raised her voice and swung a metal bat towards me and my child. "What the hell?" I managed to dodge her in a split second, but she was aiming to swing again. This was dangerous. I thought I had to run away, but my legs were trembling and I couldn't move from the spot. Then a security guard who happened to be nearby came over and protected us. Soon my husband and the others arrived and restrained her. "Let go of me! What are you doing?" She screamed and thrashed about being held down, causing a scene in front of everyone. I could feel the blood draining from my face at the sight. The child I was holding in my arm must have sensed something as well because they started crying as if they were on fire. "Are you okay, Sarah?" Tom came over to me and stroked my back, seeing my face pale. "What's going on? Why is she here, for starters? I didn't notify anyone about my discharge today." That's right, only a handful of people knew that I was being discharged today. So why does she know that I was being discharged today? "Hey, no one told you about the discharge. How the hell did you know?" He questioned Luna, who was being restrained. Then we heard unbelievable words from her mouth. "Of course, I've been staking out here every day." Apparently she had been coming to the hospital every day to meet me, waiting for me to leave. "You've been here every day? What about your job? You didn't ditch just to be here, did you?" If she had skipped work to be here, that would be a problem. "Don't be ridiculous. Even I wouldn't do such a thing. I told my boss that I've been harassed by the groom's sister and my marriage has been ruined. I'm so shocked that I can't recover, so I'm taking a break. So it's not like I'm playing hooky being here today," she explained confidently, but I think it does qualify as playing hooky. And by the groom's sister, she means me. How was I supposed to harass my brother's bride? I didn't even have time to harass her when I first met her that day. I felt frustrated not knowing what she was talking about. "Stop lying for once. My sister didn't harass you. That was our first encounter. You need to understand the gravity of what you've done." It seems that she still didn't understand the severity of her actions. When my brother asked why she did this, she apparently still had feelings for him and wanted him to reconsider by threatening me and mediating their relationship. But if she does something like this, it would only further distance my brother. On top of that, he wouldn't want to have anything to do with her for the rest of his life. Doesn't she realize that she's doing the complete opposite? "Hey, let's start over again. If we talk, we can understand each other. We don't need to cancel our marriage for such a person. You said you love children, right? I'm young, so I can give birth to as many as you want. Let's build a happy family together." Feeling a chill down my spine, I looked at her face, beaming with a smile. "Huh? What are you talking about? Are you okay? There is no way I could live with someone whose screws have come loose. The place you're going to is a jail cell." Immediately after, we could hear the sounds of sirens and several police cars parked nearby. The police officers came over to us immediately, and Luna was taken away. She was shouting at us, "Let go! I was deceived by them. The bad one is that woman. Arrest that woman!" Until she got into the police car, but many people witnessed her swinging the bat at me. After all, this is the entrance of a general hospital, with many patients, their families, and hospital staff coming and going. Our witnesses explained to the police that Luna had swung the bat at me, so her claims were disregarded, and she was taken straight to the police station. As a precaution, I had myself and my child examined. Thankfully, due to my quick reflexes, neither of us were injured. I was relieved to have been able to protect my child. Subsequently, Luna was arrested on charges of attempted assault against us. Someone who had witnessed the scene that day ended up uploading the incident on social media. Although the video was immediately removed by the platform's administration, it had been viewed and shared by a significant number of people, making it impossible to completely erase. As a result of the incident and its spread, Luna lost her job and her parents were forced into a situation where they had to move. Then, Luna's parents came to my family home. "Please help us. We live on pensions and have no money. We can't afford to pay compensation," they pleaded. "Let's settle this peacefully," they suggested. Once Luna was behind bars, it became the responsibility of her parents to pay the damages. They had come to us for a settlement, stating they had no money since they were living on pensions. "No matter what you say, I can't forgive you. If you contact us any further, I will consult the police," I responded. Previously, the two of them would have apologized with a smug smile on their faces, but today, they were genuinely in trouble. They repeatedly apologized. Even so, I could not forgive them. When it became clear they wouldn't leave despite being told numerous times, my husband threatened to call the police and they hastily left. After a discussion with my parents, my husband, and Brian, we decided to move out of this house as we couldn't guarantee they wouldn't return. In case of unforeseen circumstances, we moved in a high-security apartment. Everyone changed their phone numbers so we should no longer be reachable. Later, the compensation was safely paid and we were relieved. However, the three of them faced ruin. Luna was still behind bars, and even if she were to be released, it would be difficult for her to reintegrate into society given her name, face, and video had spread worldwide. Her parents were living on pension, but they couldn't afford to repay their debts and had to resort to working 6 days a week at part-time jobs. As for Luna, she seemed to be making money from working nights. But the patrons who knew about her past turned her into a joke, so she's been hopping from one place to another. They were out of money and barely scraping by, with daily fights over finances becoming a constant occurrence.
My name is Cassie. I'm 35 years old. I married Wilfred 5 years ago. We initially wanted to have kids and even went through preconception care, but it just didn't happen. It was emotionally and physically draining, so we decided to give up on having children. I still love kids, and sometimes when I see a baby, I think, I wish we could have had one. But life with just Wilfred is peaceful, and I've come to appreciate that. Then one day, my brother-in-law and his wife showed up unexpectedly. Wilfred was at work, but I work from home, so I answered the door. To my surprise, my brother-in-law Curtis and his wife Isadora had large carry-on bags with them. Going on a trip? My guess was right. Isadora said, "Long time no see, Cassie. We're actually going to Bali." I really don't like Isadora. She and Curtis got married before Wilfred and I did. She once said to us, "You two are a perfect match, both missing the marriage boat." And I found it incredibly rude. Isadora loves to brag about Curtis working at a top-tier company. She never misses an opportunity to say, "My Curtis works at a prestigious company." And it's always annoying. What I hate the most is her making fun of our infertility. She knew we were doing preconception care, but said, "Doesn't preconception care feel unnatural? Will a child born that way even grow up properly? A naturally born child is always best, like our daughter Sasha." So it wasn't surprising that she came to brag about her trip to Bali. I was about to say, "Have a good trip," and close the door when Isadora said, "Wait," and pushed her 3-year-old daughter Sasha towards me. "We came to leave Sasha with you. She's too young to appreciate Bali. We'll be gone for a week, so take good care of her." "Excuse me?" Still stunned, Isadora went on. "Sasha has dry skin, so please apply cream after her bath. Oh, and she usually goes to bed at 8, so make sure she's asleep by then. She's potty training, so take her to the toilet as much as possible. And absolutely no eggs. She's allergic." "Wait. What?" "No, I can't do this. You can't just drop this on me." I tried to refuse her overwhelming demands, but Isadora ignored me. She tilted her head and smirked. "Cassie, you were doing preconception care, right? You wanted kids. I thought you'd be happy to look after a child you couldn't have, even if it's just for a week." Her words were so shocking, I couldn't say anything. Isadora dropped one more bombshell before leaving. "Take good care of Sasha. Oh, and don't leave her with my mother-in-law. I can't stand her."
Sasha, listen to your aunt, okay?
Curtis patted Sasha's head, and they left for their trip. Sasha and I stood dumbfounded at the doorway. When she realized she'd been left behind, she started to cry. I hurriedly took her inside. I'd wanted kids but had almost no experience with them. I didn't know what to do with a crying Sasha, so I tried to soothe her by saying, "It's okay," and showing her some cartoons on TV. Finally, she calmed down. Sasha had a small backpack with 3 diapers and a change of clothes for 1 day. Even with no parenting experience, I knew this wasn't enough for a week. Isadora often says, "This is why poor people," about us. But if she thinks we're poor, why didn't she leave any money for Sasha's care? My frustration grew. Isadora hates my mother-in-law, but I don't. I immediately called her for help. "I'm sorry to ask this so suddenly," I explained over the phone. "Oh my, what a situation!" she exclaimed and rushed over. My mother-in-law is straightforward, and often misunderstood as harsh, but I like her cheerful and no-nonsense personality. "Grandma!" "Sasha, long time no see. How have you been?" Sasha was thrilled to see her. Isadora never visited her in-laws, but when she was away for work, Curtis would often leave Sasha with my mother-in-law. Of course, we kept it a secret from Isadora. My Sasha has become quite the talker. Curtis can't keep secrets, so he stopped leaving her with me. It's nice to see Sasha after so long, said my mother-in-law, genuinely happy. Sasha seemed happy too. So when my mother-in-law asked if she could take her, I said, please do. That night, Wilfred came home. When I told him what happened, he was furious.
Isadora knew we wanted kids, and still said that? You handled it well, Cassie. I would have lost my temper,
he said, making me feel a bit better. A week later, a tanned Curtis and Isadora came to pick up Sasha. Wilfred had taken the day off, so we both confronted them. When we told them we'd left Sasha with my mother-in-law, Isadora's face twisted in anger. I told you not to leave her with my mother-in-law. I hate her. Sasha likes her for some reason, and it bothers me.
Isadora, could you not openly say you hate someone's mother? It's rude.
Wilfred calmly replied. Isadora glared at me. I left Sasha with you out of goodwill. You both wanted kids, so I thought you should experience what it's like. It's not all fun and games, and you trampled on my goodwill by not even listening to my simple request. That's low. Her audacity left me cold. I snapped. People probably got mad at this. I confronted Isadora with the words that came to my mind, which had become strangely calm. The ones who are low are you and Curtis. What? Why didn't you take Sasha on your trip? You say she's too young to appreciate ballet, but you just didn't want the hassle. And leaving her for a week with only 3 diapers and 1 change of clothes, what's that about? Well, would you normally leave your egg-allergic child with someone else, even a relative? Allergies can be life-threatening, and Sasha cried when you left. Did you even consider how she'd feel being abandoned for a week? Isadora and Curtis were speechless. Finally, Isadora forced out some words. But I left Sasha with you out of goodwill, Cassie. You work from home. You have time. We're family. You could help a little with childcare. Or is it because you're poor and you didn't get paid for babysitting? As I sighed at Isadora's relentless need to belittle me, Wilfred, standing next to me, spoke up.
Listen, Isadora, you keep calling us poor, but I think we earn more than you do. I work for a top international company, and Cassie makes twice as much as Curtis.
As he said this, he pointed to a character merchandise displayed in our entryway.
Recognize this character? Cassie designed it.
What? Isadora and Curtis looked stunned, and for good reason. I'd never told them, not wanting to brag. But I was the designer of a character everyone knows. Designing its illustrations and merchandise is my main job, but I also illustrate children's books and create corporate mascots. I'm far from idle at home. I had no idea Cassie was such an amazing illustrator.
Hey Cassie, give me an autograph. I want to show off at work.
I couldn't hide my disdain as Curtis stepped forward, ignoring his stunned wife, and asked for an autograph. No. I refused, but he kept begging.
Come on, please.
Just then, my mother-in-law walked up from behind Isadora and Curtis.
Ah, Mom.
Wilfred noticed her, and Isadora quickly turned around. Isabella told her mother-in-law to bite. Mother-in-law, thank you for taking care of Sasha. We'll take her back now. No, I'll keep Sasha for a while longer. What?
What are you talking about, Mom?
Isadora and Curtis half smiled, thinking my mother-in-law was joking, but she was serious. Have you been feeding Sasha properly? My mother-in-law had been concerned that Sasha was smaller than other kids her age. After cooking for her every day, being mindful of her egg allergy, Sasha had said, Mom and Dad never cook. It seems that Isadora and Curtis found it too much of a hassle to prepare meals for their 2-year-old daughter Sasha, who has an egg allergy, So they've been giving her store-bought baby food. You can't blame anyone for calling this neglect. I've reported you to Child Protective Services. I've also offered to take care of Sasha for a while, so you two should go home," said the mother-in-law, who had worked as a public health nurse for many years and was very knowledgeable about child development. Although she had always been suspicious, she had turned a blind eye, thinking it was wrong to doubt her own son and his wife. But after spending a week together, she decided that she couldn't ignore the situation any longer. After a heated argument at the front door, Isadora and Curtis retreated, unable to withstand the mother-in-law's forcefulness. "I'm sorry for causing such a scene. Don't worry, I'll take care of Sasha," she said before leaving. Within a month of this big commotion, Curtis showed up unannounced at our house. Apparently, his affair had been discovered. He had lied about going on a business trip abroad and was caught meeting his mistress. Isadora kicked him out. Initially, he went to his parents' house, but since Sasha was there, his father-in-law kicked him out. And he had no choice but to come to our place. Of course, we have no obligation to hide Curtis at our house, so Wilfred and I flatly refused. "We have no obligation to harbor you. Why don't you find a hotel?" we told him. And he left, shoulders slumped. In the end, Isadora and Curtis divorced. Curtis gained sole custody and moved back in with his parents after apologizing. I've heard from my mother-in-law that he's working hard to be a good dad to Sasha now, I learned. Isadora, who had not been properly raising Sasha, lost custody and broke down crying during the negotiations. She quit her job and returned to her parents' home in the countryside. It was pitiful to see Isadora, who had always acted so superior, end up broken and retreating to the countryside. "Auntie, did you come to play again today?" "Yeah, what should we play today?" "Let's play house. You be the baby, and Sasha would be the mom." "Sure." I started visiting my in-laws to play with Sasha during my work breaks. Both my in-laws and Curtis, who works during the day, are grateful for it. "I really appreciate you being so good to Sasha," Curtis told me recently. But even without their gratitude, I'm just happy to be friends with Sasha. When she lived with Isadora and Curtis, she often had a doll-like expression. But now she shows a lively, childlike smile. And above all, I love my picture books. And she absolutely loved the picture books I bring from work, which boosts my motivation even more.
I found out my wife was having an affair. To start with, I'm a 30-year-old office worker, and my wife is a 27-year-old housewife. We don't have any children. I sensed that my wife was having an affair simply because she was showing obvious signs. She started being cold towards me. She started wearing revealing outfits. She started going out more at night, and even stayed out overnight. She continuously refused to be intimate with me. She would never leave her phone. Her behavior was so off that, despite feeling bad about it, I ended up checking her phone. It was locked, but I knew her passcode since before our marriage, so I could check it with ease. And when I went through her phone, it was clear she was having an affair. Her phone had many photos saved on it, a lot of photos showing her looking close with some man I didn't recognize. Looking closely, I noticed that certain dates were marked in her phone's calendar. These dates matched the days she was out or stayed out overnight, and it seemed like they were meeting almost every day. What's more, it looked like she'd even been meeting her lover on our wedding anniversary, and even on my birthday. While at home, she'd celebrate with me, wishing me happy birthday. But behind my back, she was out with another man. I was speechless. It seems she's been having an affair for several months now. Thinking back, I can see why this might have happened. I was often busy with work, and I know I made my wife feel lonely. That probably prompted her to have an affair. And it seemed her heart was now leaning towards her lover. Many messages were left, They insulted me and talked about their love for each other. Incredibly, she had even messaged the man about divorcing me and marrying her lover. Seeing that, my heart was torn into pieces. I truly loved my wife. I greatly cherished her. But she didn't feel the same about me. I was lost and couldn't do anything but cry. Since then, I have changed. I started coming home as early as possible every day and actively helped with household chores. I would actively talk to her and worked to keep conversations going with her. In the beginning, my wife responded coldly. She just ignored me many times, even when I spoke to her. But I still kept talking to her. Although my wife wasn't on board, I even convinced her to go on a trip together. On weekends, I took her out to places like movie theaters and tourist spots, spending as much time as I could with her. On anniversaries, I would surprise her with gifts or cook for her. I spent every day trying to do something for my wife. It seemed she continued to meet her lover during this time. Still, I tried to stay as a couple with my wife. Thanks to my efforts, my wife gradually started to interact with me. We started having more conversations, laughing together, and even cooking together. Where should we go on our next day off? Where should we go on our next trip? My wife started to seem excited about these discussions. Little by little, I felt like the distance between us became close again. One day, I bought a weekly magazine to kill time at work and brought it home. When I got out of the bath, my wife was reading that magazine. As soon as she noticed me, she immediately put the magazine back on the desk and smiled at me. I guess she was reading an article about women having affairs. Then she asked me, "What would you do if I had an affair?" My heart fluttered a little. Nevertheless, I smiled at my wife. And then I said, "You'd never cheat on me." My wife responded jokingly, "How would you know?" I further explained, "Because I trust you. I believe you'd never do something like that." At that moment, her expression hardened slightly. I continued, "Honestly, I don't know if I'm a good husband for you, but I genuinely care for you, and I am definitely your husband. And as your husband, who else would trust you more? I can't speak for you, but I truly care for you. I sincerely love you." Upon hearing this, she suddenly started crying, and amidst her tears, she said, "Me too." From then on, she changed even more. She began talking to me more frequently. Though I felt guilty, I checked her phone a few times. Previously, she was meeting her lover almost every day, but the frequency had reduced to about 2 or 3 times a month. Their exchanges were mostly arguments, and I felt she was slowly returning to me. I was happy. I was confident that if things continued this way, her heart would return to me. And just as I had hoped, I felt her love for me growing deeper. I was able to reclaim my wife from her affair and amend our marriage. I am truly happy now, is what my wife believes. In reality, it was all preparation for my revenge. What would I do if my wife ever cheats on me? Simple answer, I would retaliate in every possible way. Indeed, I loved my wife. I truly loved her and fully believed her when she said she loved me. When I found out the affair, I truly believed it was my fault for neglecting her. But that photo was too much. It clearly showed the face of the other man, and their exchanges were horrific. "What will we do if you get pregnant?" "It's okay, we'll just say it's that dork's child." "You're terrible. Maybe we should just get married." "I'd love that. I'll take alimony from the dork and divorce him." The worst part was, should we do it in the park again? "But I'd be embarrassed if someone saw us." "That might be fun." What a disgusting wife. Absolutely filthy. From now on, I won't call her my wife. I'll call her the filthy wife. They're really stupid. They left all the evidence behind. My emotions cycled through feelings of sadness, anger, disbelief, and laughter at the speed of light. I couldn't even feel sadness or anger anymore. There was no value in forgiving her. I decided to get a divorce. But that wasn't enough. At that moment, I decided to take revenge on those idiots. I quickly made copies and saved everything. It seemed like the filthy wife and her lover were meeting almost every day, so I anticipated that I could quickly gather evidence by hiring a private investigator. They were practically flaunting their relationship. They were making a fool of me. But then I started thinking, let's say I gather all the evidence and confront them. Considering the filthy wife's character, I could predict that she would insult me and leave. Of course, I intended to take alimony, but that wouldn't satisfy me. If we were getting divorced, I wanted my unfaithful wife to beg for my forgiveness with tears, for me to look down on her as I hand her the divorce papers with a smirk. How can I do that? It's quite simple. I just needed to win my wife back. And so, my battle began the following day. The following days were hellish. I did exactly as I wrote at the beginning. Meanwhile, I contacted a detective agency to gather evidence against my cheating wife. Since they were still meeting up every day, I got a call within a week saying that the investigator had gathered more than enough evidence. The old man at the detective agency even joked about how easy his job would be if it was always like this. Still, he diligently continued collecting more evidence. Yes, it was costing me a lot of money, but I didn't care. I planned to claim it all back later anyway. I also asked the detective agency to investigate the man she was cheating on me with. He was 28 at the time and worked for a pretty big company. That jerk was indeed married. When I covertly watched the guy's house from a distance, I was surprised. His wife was incredibly beautiful. In contrast, my cheating wife was neither beautiful nor cute. She was about a solid 5. Comparing my cheating wife with his wife, it was clear that his wife was far better looking. I couldn't understand why he would cheat on such a wife with mine. Despite all this, I was still trying to win my wife back, and I installed hidden cameras and recorders in the house. Since she often disappeared at night, I was able to collect a lot of evidence. By the way, my cheating wife goes to the gym at night. While I'm at work, her lover would come to my house in his suit for their secret meetings. Even when I was home, they would have their secret meetings outside. When I checked the recorder, I heard her saying, "disgusting," after receiving a gift from me. And the other night, she told her lover on the phone that she turned me down after I initiated some intimacy at night. Just picturing my cheating wife's downfall made me laugh uncontrollably. During this tormenting period, I noticed my cheating wife's attitude toward me gradually changing. She started responding with a smile when I spoke to her. She looked excited when I invited her on a trip, and the frequency of her meetings with her lover drastically decreased while their arguments increased. That's when I felt confident that her heart was starting to lean toward me again. Therefore, I decided to move to the final phase. When I got home, I left a tabloid paper featuring stories of wives' infidelity prominently on the table and went to take a bath. I was sure that my tabloid-loving cheating wife would definitely read it. If there wasn't a feature story, I planned to casually steer the conversation toward that topic. As I expected, my cheating wife asked what I would do if she cheated. And then, that bastard went on crying, talking about, "me too." I was struggling to suppress my laughter. It was going exactly as planned, and I was desperately trying not to laugh. In fact, a few days later, there was a dinner planned with me, my cheating wife, and both of our parents. The plan was for all of us to get together for a meal once in a while. Of course, it was my idea. Everything was set in motion for that moment. The day arrived and the location was at my parents' house. There, everyone had gathered. The dinner was progressing smoothly. And then the time came. I began to pretend to cry. Even though no tears were coming out, I suddenly started crying. So naturally, everyone began to panic. Hey, Mike, what's going on? Mike? What happened? I'm sorry. From my perspective, it was a convincing performance. But I thought it might not be believable without tears, so I decided to go to the bathroom. There, I applied the eye drops that I had brought in my pocket. When I returned from the bathroom, I was in a state of overwhelming tears. Everyone was even more panicked. Then, finally, I began to speak. I'm sorry, I lost my composure a bit. That's fine. But what on earth happened? Yes, I was just so happy being here, eating with everyone, that I felt sad thinking about it ending. Ending? What do you mean? Yeah, I'm sorry. Dad, Mom, father-in-law, mother-in-law. I'm getting a divorce. What? Everyone was dumbfounded. Especially my wife's expression was priceless. And there on out, everyone started pressing me. Especially my wife was extremely upset. I had no idea what she was saying. Then I pulled out an A3 envelope from the bag I brought. And from there, I pulled out several pictures. I noticed something strange about my wife a while ago, but I wanted to trust her. So, to confirm my trust in her, I decided to find out the truth. I felt guilty, but I had to know what was going on. And this is what I found. When I showed the pictures, everyone focused on them. At that moment, my wife froze. Not just my wife, everyone there, except me, was frozen. Of course they would be. Because those pictures, taken secretly by my investigator, showed my wife with another man. Among all the evidence pictures, these were the best shots I had chosen. Even in the night, their faces were clearly visible, showing how amazing cameras are these days. The faces of my wife and the other man were clearly visible. I was laughing inside. While pretending to cry and covering my face, I was hiding my grinning cheeks. Remembering it still gets me excited. Then, suddenly, my wife started screaming. The moment he heard that, my father-in-law lost his temper. You filthy bastard! He slapped my wife, and she was blown away. A critical hit, she was knocked out in one shot. But my wife's father didn't stop there. He took a mounted position and started a barrage of slaps. You! How could you? How could you? In the meantime, my mother-in-law moved in front of my father-in-law and started hitting my wife on the head while shouting, You! What a daughter you are! In front of my wife's parents' combined attack, my wife had no way out. Finally, my parents regained their senses and tried to stop my wife's parents. I was still pretending to cry. After that, it was chaos for a while, but when things calmed down a bit, we started talking. The room was already like awake. The adulterous wife and her parents were stunned. My parents wore bitter expressions. My mom was crying. I'm sorry, Mom. But I didn't let that stop and continued the conversation. By the way, I figured there was no need to act anymore, so I'd return to a neutral expression. So, honey, what's this about? It's not what it looks like. It's a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding, you say? In front of these perfectly taken pictures, what nonsense are you spouting? Misunderstanding? What do you mean? It's not like that. It's not like that. The conversation was going nowhere. So, I decided to make my next move. I slowly stood up with my phone in my hand, and I made a call. Hello? Yeah, it's me. Do you mind coming here now? Understood. I'll be there shortly. And I hung up. Everyone was once again left dumbstruck. After a while, a group arrived at my parents' house. It was a group of my wife's lover, his wife, and his parents. The moment we saw them, my cheating wife and both of our parents froze. The moment they entered the house, my wife's lover, his wife, and his parents all bowed down deeply. My husband has caused you great inconvenience this time. No, it's not your fault. The infidelity of my husband is my responsibility. Then the guy's parents deeply bowed their heads. I am his father. I don't know how to apologize for this. There's no need. Please, raise your heads. But the guy refused to raise his head. He probably couldn't. His face had gone completely pale, and seeing that, his father lost his temper. If you don't lower your head now! The guy's father grabbed his head and forced it down. Rather, he pushed his face onto the floor. He hit his nose on the floor and started bleeding. While letting the nosebleed flow and half crying, he lowered his head, trembling. Seeing this, my cheating wife was shivering. It was a good sight. It really was a fabulous sight. A few days before this day, I had actually been in contact with the guy's wife. I showed her the evidence I had collected and told her about her husband's infidelity. The other man's wife was crying. According to her, he showed no signs of cheating. She just said that her husband had been busy with work, and she had been waiting for him to come home late every night to take care of him. What a pitiful story. Despite waiting for her husband till late, he was outside cheating on her with my filthy wife. So, I told her about my plan for today and arranged for the guy's parents to come with her when I called. Well, the guy's gotta be here for a show like this. After that, a big meeting was held. My cheating wife and her lover were slurring out sloppy explanations. Next to each of them were their own fathers seated, and if they said something ridiculous, the fathers would punch them and shut them up. It took some time, but eventually the whole picture came into view. They had met about a year and a half ago. It all started when the guy hit on my wife while she was walking outside. At first, they were meeting secretly, but as they got too comfortable, believing that neither I nor the guy's wife had a clue, they started seeing each other almost daily and became close friends. Then they started denying that they had romantic feelings for each other, insisting that the only people they truly loved were their own respective partner. I decided to play a recording I had. Baby, I love you. I don't care about that loser anymore. Damn, sweetie, I love you more than my wife. Oh, baby, let's get married. That was my favorite voice record of the two. The moment they heard that, the guy's face turned from pale to green, and the woman screamed an ultrasonic wail. Simultaneously, their fathers resumed their public execution. I decided to get to the main point. First, let the guy's wife press him down. She faced to her husband and glared at him. I think you already understand this, but we can't continue our marriage anymore. Let's get a divorce. What? Wait a minute. Shut up and nod. Again, he threw a straight punch. Ignoring the heated scene, I proceeded to bring up my demand. Let's settle things between us, too. You mean divorce, obviously. No, anything but that. Are you stupid? After all this, you can still say that? Listen, Mike, I really like you. I love you. Like I could trust that. It's true. I realized how important you are. I don't care about that man anymore. It's only you. What about that? You didn't care about our marriage? No, I really do love you. Of course, no one would believe such a woman's words. I was maintaining my composure, but only I knew. That was her true feelings. Yes, all the hardships I went through for her until now were all for this moment. She had completely fallen back in love with me, but I pushed it away, abandoned it, and trampled on it. I looked down on her. I really looked down on her. Underneath, she clung to my leg, crying and begging for forgiveness. I couldn't stand it anymore. Something like a lump in my heart seemed to be pulled out. I felt like I could fly if I closed my eyes. Such a refreshing feeling took over me. Advancing the discussion was difficult. In the meantime, the guy's parents left my house. They left to finish their discussion at their place. They assured me to immediately pay some amount of alimony in cash. In return, they asked to avoid a lawsuit. I agreed to that and ended the discussion with them after I had them sign my pre-prepared document of agreement. Now, on to my cheating wife. Honestly, I think she was on the verge of going mad. She collapsed, crying with a blank expression, and screamed every time the topic of divorce came up. I was wondering why she was playing the victim at that time. Since she was not making any sense, I decided to talk to her parents. Their request was the same. They would definitely pay the alimony, no matter the amount, since what their daughter did was unforgivable. But they wanted to avoid any lawsuits. No matter what she did, she was still their daughter, after all. That was their say. Frankly, at that point, I was satisfied just seeing the devastated sight of my cheating wife. All I wanted was for them to cover the expenses for hiring a detective and my legal consultation fees. Over the next few days, I went back and forth to my wife's parents' house, and after talking with my hysterical wife and her parents, I managed to get a signature on a written oath and arranged the divorce papers. After some time, I received alimony payments from both of them. I won't mention the specific amount, but it was a considerable sum. Well, since then, my filthy wife, no, my now ex-wife, started acting like a stalker. No matter how many times her parents brought her back, she wouldn't stop. Fed up, I quit my job and moved. I had a job lined up in my new location, thanks to my acquaintance. The pay was a bit lower, but the job was more rewarding than my previous one. Of course, I didn't tell my ex-wife's parents about my new place. I also canceled my phone contract and called my parents with a blocked number. And that brings us to the end. Looking back, my revenge on my wife did ruin her down big time. She became a stalker and I had to move. Her parents had to keep her at home and seemed to be having a hard time. That part does make me feel guilty. I couldn't forgive my ex-wife, but I had no grudge against her parents. Still, I'm really glad that I was able to cut ties with them. As for the guy she cheated on me with, he also got divorced and seems to have been disowned by his parents. Moreover, he's apparently being sued for by a significant amount of alimony by his ex-wife. His ex-wife didn't demand alimony from my ex-wife, but instead demanded it all from him. Because of those payments, he's struggling every month. I heard this from his ex-wife. Actually, we've been meeting quite often recently. We're not ready to consider marriage or anything like that yet, but we're on good terms. This is the revenge I took. I'll be starting work next week, so I thought I'd write this down as a memento. Sorry if this story is boring, but excuse me because it's just for my self-satisfaction. I tried to write down everything that happened on the surface and the plans I had behind the scenes, but it turned out to be an enormous story. That just shows how much preparation I did and how many people were involved. Really, it was incredibly hard. When I first started planning, I didn't think it would be so tough. Pretending to get along with a wife who betrayed me, even as an act, was hard enough to almost ruin my mental. There were times when it was so mentally tough that I felt like throwing up. So, when I finally pulled it off, I felt a great sense of achievement emerge within me that was separate from the satisfaction I got from my revenge.